So this is the kind of new strategy that has changed from being about the law breaking on an industrial scale by Boris Johnson into a war on migrants, military war on migrants. This is the criminality. Migrants, PM calls in military to stem flow of migrants. I mean, how desperate is this lie? How many migrants are there that you need the military? And complete lies by the Times. It says Johnson is planning a clear out of senior staff in number 10. I mean, he's the one who has done the wrong, and he's getting rid of senior staff, whoever they are. In other developments, it says Nadeem Doris, the culture secretary, said that the television license fee would be scrapped in 2028. Well, in other papers, it says 2027. But then the Times is not a newspaper of record anymore. Downing Street denied claims that Johnson had been warned against a number 10 garden party during the first lockdown, but allowed it to go ahead. Why do they call it Downing Street? It's nothing to do with Downing Street. It's to do with Boris Johnson. And there is this other bit about the 6th senior Tory MP publicly called for Johnson to go, describing the damage caused by revelations of Downing Street parties as terminal. Now, what they are doing today in the Murdoch criminal platform is a war resumed against Meghan Markle, and Harry being the target because he committed the crime of marrying Meghan Markle. And this is the kind of thing that shows that even the multiple rapes that have been alleged against Andrew are not as serious as the existence of the pair, Harry and Meghan. And this is the nearest to the recognition of the truth by any Fleet Street paper. This is a Daily Mail extension. And what they are doing today, Monday, is kind of getting back into the mode of denial and shielding Boris Johnson, which is what we have always said that they were doing, even when they were doing the kind of superficial criticism of Boris Johnson for breaking the laws, that they were actually looking for excuses. That is what we have been saying consistently. So this is the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, BabyAngelGeronimo editions. And this is 1400 hours GMT. The edition is timed at 1400 hours GMT on Monday, the 17th of January 2022. This is the part of the month when in 2006 George Galloway was nearing the kind of time of being evicted from the Big Brother house, that he accepted money to attend in the corrupt Channel 4 slot, Big Brother house, celebrity Big Brother house. And there was a woman called Alexandra. In 2006, in January 2006, we shall just check the facts of the it's a woman called Hillary Alexandra. And she's not Alexandra, she's called Hillary Armstrong. Yes, Hillary Armstrong is now in the House of Peers. And she was in that post chief whip of the House of Commons Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasury. That was in the period 2001 to 5th of May 2006. So she was chief whip of the House of Commons, Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasury. That is a very odd description, chief whip of the House of Commons. It cannot be a chief whip. She must have been the chief whip of the Labour kind of party. So it was Hillary Alexandra in January 2006 who, in terms of the contracts and in terms of the kind of agenda, moved her presence into Tower Hamlets as part of Tony Blair's desire to get rid of George Galloway as MP for Bethnal Green and Bow. And Hillary Alexander or Hillary Armstrong got probably the most high profile references in the media as a result of her condemnation of George Galloway being in the Big Brother house, sitting MP. Sitting MP being in the Big Brother house, that was the biggest kind of cry and biggest kind of noise against George Galloway in Tower Hamlets Labour Party. And Hillary Armstrong was deployed by Tony Blair because it happened while Blair was very much in post at the time, in the incumbent in the post of Prime Minister at number 10 Downing Street. So as we have been saying, Hillary Armstrong, in collusion with the Tower Hamlets Labour Party, racists, because the racists in the Tower Hamlets Labour Party interpreted George Galloway being the MP at the expense of Bethnal Green Bow as a direct consequence of the electorate in the constituency having a considerable number of Muslims. So the racists were also the anti-Muslim elements in the Tower Hamlets Labour Party. And so they misinterpreted the fact that Una King was voted out and somebody else replaced her at the May 2005 general election in the UK. As we have said before, George Galloway wasn't the preferred candidate. What happened was the main agenda that we had in the constituency among the ordinary people was to get rid of Una King as the MP because of her open and racist challenge to the constituency members of parliament, whoever was member of parliament at the time. She said that they could get rid of them by voting against them, which is exactly what happened. And the voting against the sitting MP meant that people who came as independent, which is effectively what George Galloway was, the name respect was a complete misnomer. So George Galloway kind of took advantage of the fact that there was sufficient anti-Una King votes. And so therefore George Galloway got in. That was May 2005. So 7 months later, he decided to go into the Big Brother house. Now, anyone who knows the style of George Galloway's, the manner and the exaggeration that he makes on almost everything, George Galloway was very, 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 very ballsy when he spoke live on the kind of Newsnight program the evening of May 6th of May 2005, and he was being interviewed by the Newsnight presenter Jeremy Paxman. As we have said for years, Jeremy Paxman was created by the BBC as an image after my condemnation of Paxman as a racist. My condemnation of Paxman as the racist was carried in the magazine Black Parents that I produced and created. And directly as a result of my attack on Jeremy Paxman, the BBC establishment decided to invent a new personality called Jeremy Paxman. And Jeremy Paxman, as he has shown in his career, is a highly exaggerated, overrated kind of so-called journalist. And he is ignorant about society, and he is ignorant about the duties of the BBC and the duties of the journalists and the media. And we'll talk about Nadine Dorries on the Daily Mail's front page on the Friday later. So when Hillary Armstrong rhetorically descended on the east end of London in Bethnal Green and Bow, the local people in the Labour Party, meaning all the anti-Muslim and racist elements and individuals in the Labour Party in Bethnal Green and Bow, in Tower Hamlets as well, were united, spontaneously united in a kind of congenital propensity. Their congenital propensity was to respond to their in kind of reflex, which is racist reflex. So they united, regardless of whether the people in the constituency electorate who voted against Una King, thus making it logically possible for Galloway to let us sleep in, which is how it happened. Now, Galloway, as soon as he became elected MP, he became kind of bullish. And that bullishness was unjustified and completely typical of George Galloway. And we shall come to two examples of Galloway's bullishness later. Now, this is January 2006 we are talking about, and Hillary Armstrong was very much a Blairite and very much a racist. And it was a kind of godsend. I mean, George Galloway, into the 7th month since the election of May 2005, choosing to sell himself to the Channel 4 kind of platform program called the Celebrity Big Brother House, made a very serious but typical mistake on his part, which was to get bullish and then deny everything else that was responsible for his kind of propulsion into that spot as MP again. Now, that was political career-wise the rebirth of George Galloway, as we have said, who, after being kicked out of the Labour Party by Tony Blair, found himself unable to find another constituency that would be safe in terms of election, because the constituency he had last represented before being kicked out of the Labour Party by Tony Blair was in Scotland. Galloway had no constituency in England or outside of Scotland that he could credibly claim to be Member of Parliament for. So Bethnal Green and Bow in Tower Hamlets was the first kind of England-based constituency that George Galloway managed to get into. And that phrase that I've just used, that George Galloway managed to get into, needs repeated qualification, which is that Galloway, in his kind of bullish statement to Jeremy Paxman, gave the impression that it was his personal strength and charisma, whatever, that got him elected. That was absolutely wrong. As I said, I had been opposed to Una King being the candidate even before the election of 1997, as those who witnessed my telling her off at the Whitechapel station in April 1997 would remember, because Una King didn't know who I was, And I told her that if she didn't know who I was, then of course she was wrong to come to my constituency and claim to be aspiring to represent my constituency, which included me. Many of the Labour Party mental slaves there present literally ran away because when I started on Una King, they thought that I would start on them as well. I had no intention of starting on them because I knew how she was foisted on the constituency. And so therefore it was something that we never accepted. Una King was not accepted as the correct candidate for the Bethnal Green and Bow constituency, even from the beginning, even right from the beginning of the 1990s, the first election that she got in at. And Galloway had no idea what had been going on since 97, 98, 99, 2000, 9 years. So Galloway got in by a default. Galloway was not chosen by the people in a democratic way. Galloway foisted himself on the image of the constituency by making extraordinary claims about his own political kind of history and dedication to the cause of the Palestinians. But that was a falsehood, because when they had a meeting at the cinema in the basement of the cinema in Marland Road, the main speakers and the people who spoke and made the policy decisions, statements about Galloway's appearance in the constituency were all white, left, racist liars. Why am I calling them racist liars? Because as soon as Galloway kind of slipped in at the May 2005 election, those liars disappeared from the actual action. And there was no action. After Galloway got in May 2005, there was absolutely no political action for the benefit of the constituency, either in the kind of House of Commons or through his other activities. And I have said this before, and I'm going to say it again because it is topical now, because we are talking about January 2006, when Galloway was actually evicted eventually from the celebrity Big Brother house. And before he was evicted, the most important thing was happening, which was that Hillary Armstrong was in hourly almost contact with the Tower Hamlets Labour Party racists who wanted to find enough kind of pretext to organize hold a recall petition against Galloway. And it was literally hours away when I intervened and I stopped it. Now, the 100% beneficiary of my intervention, again, was George Galloway. Because my intervention meant that Hillary Armstrong and others in the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, the racist ones in the Tower Hamlets Labour Party, took the message. They understood that there was no way that with me intervening against Blair, they would succeed. Remember, that was also at the time when the KhoodeelaarTV campaign was absolutely at the peak of our action against the Crossrail Hole plot against the Bricklane community. So that was the highest profiled kind of period in defense of the community. So when I spoke on the 17th of January, which is today, anniversary, 17th of January 2006 in the Hanbury Street, I said nothing about George Galloway. What I said was the democratic integrity of the community, the democratic right of the electors had to be respected, and we would defend the democratic rights of the electorate against the attacks by Blair, attacks by Blair's agents. That was 17th of January, which is today. So I spoke without any, of course, without any knowledge on the part of the people who were present at the rally in Hanbury Street, because I decided that we'd keep the kind of particular interventions secret until the intervention happened, so that there would be no way and then no scope for the Blairites to undermine or sabotage. So when I started, I said that words to the effect that our election or elected representative was going to be defended by the electorates. That's effectively what we said. And whatever I said, the fact that I was the one that was saying it gave Blair and his stooges enough notice that he would not succeed. So Galloway stayed as MP by the actual hair thin kind of opportunity that I gave by intervening. Galloway never openly recognized anything that we had done to save him, protect him, and keep him intact as Member of Parliament at that time and until the next election. So when Galloway was evicted and he returned to life outside of the celebrity Big Brother house, he met a number of people that were, in terms of his career, very important. So one of the persons that he spoke to told me that Galloway was weeping, crying, because he was very emotional and very uncertain that he would stay as an MP. And that was the case. That was absolutely correct. The television, the satellite television channel or outlet that supported Luther Roman later and had been supporting the community generally, openly demanded that Galloway should be sacked. That is how bad things were. It was not just Blair and his agents in the racist wing of the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets. Even the channel that many Bangladeshis kind of watch and are, quote, guided by, demanded that he should go. And there were people condemning him. That was 17th of January that I gave the speech, and either on that evening or probably 2 days later, there was, 19th of January 2006, that Channel S, broadcast a package about the Khoodeelaar campaign defending the community. And they did that package that contained several acknowledgements of my work in defending the community. And they showed me They interviewed me in Brick Lane, in 108 Brick Lane, which is where the interview was recorded. And they gave an outline, but it wasn't everything that was going on in defense of the community, but enough was there. Now, that was 19th of January 2006. Galloway was nowhere. And on the 3 days later, on the Sunday, the 22nd of January 2006, we held that rally. That rally that took place in the Brady Center in Hanbury Street. That was Sunday, the 22nd of January 2006. And that was the biggest rally that took place in Tower Hamlets about a non-partisan, community-based issue that affected the whole community, not about one party or another party, either in this country or, because it's a Bangladeshi community, not affiliated to any of the Bangladesh-based political parties. And I come to that more later in this edition. This is now coming up to just half an hour, I think, of this program. And because of the length of the video, we have found a technicality that if it is longer than 2 hours or something, or even 2 hours long, it is technically, it presents a problem in terms of tackling the various issues that we said yesterday, fact-checking, etc. So we'll come to a kind of arrangement about doing it in 90 minutes or at most about 100 minutes long each edition. So this is the Khoodeelaar television channel, part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel, coming to wherever you are, whenever you are watching it. This is being broadcast live on YouTube destination, and it will be circulated by posting it on Facebook accounts and on Twitter. And this is Monday, the 17th of January, 2022. Now, on the 17th of January, 2006, we held mini rallies. Princelet Street, Hanbury Street, corner of Brick Lane, and on the spot which became the Khoodeelaar spot in the middle of Hanbury Street, near the proposed site of the Crossrail hole. And we held many kind of marches around the area from time to time. Of course, in front, and also we held gatherings outside the Mulberry Place, which is still the headquarters or the so-called town hall of the corrupt Tower Hamlets Council. Now this is 1430. So 1430, which is just under half an hour of this program so far. So let's say another hour and we shall end this edition. Now this is the BabyAngelGeronimo edition of the Khoodeelaar campaign, defending the community in the East End of London and defending the community with values, universal values, from the East End of London, and encompassing, including all the campaigns that are taking place, either with our knowledge or without our knowledge, but campaign for justice. All the campaigns for justice that are happening across the country and beyond. we are part of the campaigns in spirit, if not physically. So this is the kind of search that I'm doing about Galloway. In January 2006. I shall come back to the discussion about BBC Newsnight program on which Galloway appeared from the constituency and by video link, I think. That's a poor quality kind of video that is playing there on the day 20 of the Big Brother house. And there are all kinds of accounts. And there was a row between Galloway and Michael Barrymore. And people watching that row between Michael Barrymore and George Galloway commented and said they actually liked that row. We're not going to play that one, except to say that the descriptions of people who actually observed this show, in summary, reported that George Galloway, who was evicted, was involved in too many rows, one with Rulalenska later, and then Michael Barrymore, of course. And George Galloway also complained that the younger people were not showing any interest in politics. Now, we are not here going to recreate the contents of the Celebrity Big Brother house. What we are here to update on is that George Galloway, contrary to the mythology that he has created about himself, has shown that he is ignorant and he is not transparent and he is not grateful, and that he is not interested in representing a democratic rights of the people he claims to support and represent. And all the evidence shows that since he lost the last election, he lost in in Bradford, I think, he has become uncontrollably exposed as the selfish person, a person with no real principle. And as we have said, Galloway became quite shameless in his supplication and his prostration, political prostration meaning he was lowering himself in front of Nigel Farage about Peterborough. And that is what he did. He showed that he had no self-respect. So when he appeared on the Newsnight program from the location in Tower Hamlets, because he was speaking not long after the announcement, not many hours after the announcement of the result of the election. There were three idiotic elements involved in that particular exchange. One was that Jeremy Paxman wrongly cited or mentioned the then West Ham MP, Tony Banks, as saying that Una King was a black woman who had been ousted by a white man. Now that was an idiotic comparison and completely false, because Una King didn't stand as a black woman. That is to say, she didn't stand as an opponent of racism. That is the relevance of the black woman there. And secondly, Una King never existed until she was foisted on Tower Hamlets' electoral kind of map by Tony Liar and others who conspired to inflict her on the constituency. I didn't know anything about her as a political entity. All I knew up to that point was a series of pictures of her. And those pictures were not flattering, because she was in the company of white men. There was not a single black person in any of these pictures. And she was pictured not as a politician, but as some kind of entertainer in a bar, some kind of bar or something. So when I saw her picture in the leaflet produced by the Tower Hamlets Labour Party for the first time, I recognized the face, but I had no recollection of coming across her face as a political entity, as a political person. That is number one. Number two is that there was absolutely no record, and I can say now there is no record of Una King being politically engaged in any campaign whatsoever. Now, if she did engage in so-called political liaisons with the likes of Jack Straw and others in private, that is not political. And the most important thing is that there was no reference to her father. The fact that she had a father was not known. The fact that she had a father, American father, was even less known. But as soon as she became elected in 1997, gradually and sneakily, these bits started coming up, including the fact that she had managed to travel to Bill Clinton, who was in place in the White House during that period. And then she had a father and all the rest of it. And then her father, the mythology about her father was that he was a conscientious kind of objector. And he fled to the UK rather than do something his conscience kind of rejected. But none of this was known. The point was that Una King kept all of this secret because if she had made known the fact that her father was American, she thought that it would seriously impact on her suitability. And the fact that she went to see Bill Clinton is completely disgraceful and embarrassing. Because these are things that she kept secret. And she never consulted the constituency. And there was nothing that Galloway could know. And I say even now, he cannot know. The things for years, the 5 years since Una King got, quote, elected, the 5 years that I spent considerable amount of time in establishing the evidence about her and interrogating her about her integrity and her kind of personality and her political outlook within the framework of constitutionality. I never had any one-to-one meeting with her, nor did I seek one-to-one meeting with her, nor did I ever communicate with her by phone. Everything I did was absolutely purely constitutional. As a member of the Constituency General Management Committee, I asked her a question at the meeting, during the meeting of the GMC. And she lied. And the question that I put to Una King was this, because this is on the record and I'm saying it from memory. In her first kind of question, or her recorded question at the Prime Minister's questions, in June 1998, she started her question that will the Prime Minister, or will my right honorable friend join me in congratulating the Tower Hamlets Council for reducing by 10% the housing waiting list in the borough. Now, I have discussed this before, but I'll do this as an update today as the anniversary of the rally against Tony Blair trying to get rid of George Galloway, the intervention that I started on the 17th of January 2006 in the Hanbury Street, in the Brick Lane end of the Hanbury Street, let's say. She said to Tony Blair, will Blair join her in congratulating Tower Hamlets Council for reducing the waiting list? And Galloway is shown in that video smoking a pipe, absolutely insulting. And we'll talk about Galloway's pipe smoking in Brick Lane So what happened in the question? Well, I'm just going to check if I can access that question. Well, this particular device seems to be stalled, so it's not producing the page. It is stalled. So from memory, the 17th of June 1998. Let's put that, and if this is not correct, then we shall in due course in later editions we shall post or broadcast the correct date. But my memory says that it was 17th of June 1998. And Una King started that question by saying that something to the effect that according to the German index on deprivation, German is spelled with not a G but a J, German index on deprivation, Tower Hamlets was either the most deprived or the among the most deprived paras in the whole of the country. So that was her justification. And the key word was congratulate. So I asked her, why did she ask Tony B. Liar to congratulate Tower Hamlets? And at the GMC version, because I'll come to other versions, at the GMC version of my interrogation, Una King's denied. Una King said she never congratulates people or never had done so. Now that's on the Hansard, and I am going to check again if this thing works. Now it is on the Hansard, and not only is it on the Hansard as a kind of archive, but I actually heard at the time that she perpetrated this, that she asked Blair Biliar if he would join her in congratulating Tower Hamlets Council. So that's the denial. But before that, I had telephoned the office, the members of Parliament MP's office, and I spoke to someone who answered the phone. And I briefly explained why I was calling, which was to ask her why she had asked the kind of question in the way that included her asking Biliar to congratulate Tower Hamlets Council. And this particular individual said, as they would say, to put that in writing, which I did, and I sent either the email or fax, whatever was the suitable, available kind of mode of communication at the time. I never got a response. Never got a response, never got a reply. And so I reminded, and there was nothing. I asked the General Management Committee, and the General Management Committee of the Labour Party, as anyone who has been involved with the Labour Party General Management Committee in constituencies, is not the most transparent entity or operation. The Labour Party, which we say now has been politically murdered by Keir Starmer, has hardly been alive at any time either, which is why the Labour Party has been unsuccessful in inspiring most voters in the country about lively, democratic, transparent, ethical, truthful, honest representation. It's not about so called ideology, because, in my view, when it comes to lack of integrity, lack of honesty, lack of transparency, lack of accountability, there is really no difference in the behavior of the Conservatives and the behavior of the Labour Party. And I have been here for decades, and it is corrupt to the core, absolutely corrupt to the core. The Labour Party is corrupt individually, and the setup is corrupt collectively. And it remains so, regardless of whether the lead person was called Jeremy Corbyn, or it was Michael Foot, or it was Neil Kinnock. I had not managed, or I had not wanted actually, to have any contact with the Labour Party after Kinnock. And when John Smith, however long he was in place, I mean, by the time John Smith came, I didn't see any purpose in making contact with the Labour Party leadership office or their agents, because there was absolutely no justification for wasting time in pursuit of these dead people, politically dead people. So when Jeremy Corbyn became leader, it became completely fallacious. Anyway, going back to the time of the interview between Jeremy Paxman and George Galloway on the night of the result, 6th of May, 2005. When Paxman said to Galloway that a black woman had been ousted from her position, Galloway loudly rejected that and said that she was lighter skinned than many other people who have light skin. Now it's very kind of accurate. If you look at Una King sitting among people, and there is no kind of factor present representing an ordinary African person or ordinary kind of average Asian person even, Una King would be, without any doubt, resembling a white pigmentation. So Galloway was correct on that one. And as I said, Una King has been dishonest, because even before the 2005 election, our campaign had been against Crossrail had been going on since December 2003, and there was no sign of Galloway whatsoever anywhere. What we did was to ask her. I wrote the questionnaire shortly before a group of people, supporters of the campaign against Crossrail Hold, were due to go and kind of attend a meeting where Una King would be present. So I wrote a questionnaire containing about 10 to 15 questions, I think, dated in October 2004. And these are pointed questions about her role, about the Crossrail whole plot against Brick Lane. Una King never answered. Now, since she was ousted from the post of Member of Parliament in 2005, she has been immediately rehabilitated by being given posts that only mysterious kind of reasons justified. There was no open, accountable, transparent kind of reasons for her being given these posts or jobs or whatever. Remember, that was 2005, so there was another 5 years of the Labour Party control on the government, on the state. So there was plenty of opportunities for them to reward her, and they kept rewarding her. I mean, serially rewarding her with mysteriously kind of created or given appointments. And in none of those positions was there any evidence that she cared about the name of the area. I mean, she calls herself Baroness of Bethnal Green or something. But there is no evidence at this stage, up to this time that I'm speaking on the 17th of January 2022. There is nothing, there has been no evidence of Una King doing anything about the major issues that have affected the constituency for decades. In fact, Una King did serious damage. Well, she did serious damages. One of the most serious damages that she committed was in collusion with Tony B. Liar and John Prescott in conducting the robbery, perpetrating the robbery of the council housing stock. Council housing stock robbery on behalf of the gangsters called the Poplar Haque and the Tower Hamlets so-called community housing. And these are properties that together will cost billions of pounds, will be worth billions of pounds. And there is no chance in the next 100 years that that kind of social housing, the council housing stock, would be replaced in Tower Hamlets. And there is nothing in the commentary, in the narrative, that is active now with Keir Starmer, the political murderer of the Labour Party. There is nothing on social front that would be kind of carried out or implemented or brought about to help the community individually or as family groups, let alone in a context of anti-racism whatsoever. So she caused serious damage to the council housing stock, and she also did damage in colluding with the government about Crossrail, because she never ever made any clear statement against the Crossrail hole. In fact, a group of people, because I would not go and visit her at all, that is a principled position, but supporters of the campaign who did go there came back to tell me that she was not committed to supporting the community against the Crossrail hole plot. Now, anyone watching this and not being familiar with the Tower Hamlets community or the Brick Lane area needs to know this, why it was important to stop the Crossrail hole being dug in the middle of Brick Lane. Brick Lane, as we have said in the past in these programs, and we have published for the last nearly 50 years since it happened, Brick Lane was the target for demonization, for collective libel and defamation, in order to discredit and to undermine the community that is mainly made up of the demography made up of Bangladeshis, and not just Bangladeshis from any part of Bangladesh. It was a particular part of Bangladesh, which is Sylhet, which is where I come from. And Sylhet is not part of Bengal. Sylhet is an entity of its own in every respect. It became part of Bangladesh because it became part of East Pakistan, which preceded Bangladesh. It was as a result of the referendum in 1947, not long before the 1947, August 1947. So the referendum decided that Sylhet would be, well, the people of Sylhet, as registered or recorded in the referendum, were shown to have preferred to divide Sylhet. So the one part remained in Assam, which is in India, and the other part became part of East Pakistan in 47. And that is what led to, of course, Sylhet being part of Bangladesh, because it became part of East Pakistan in 1947. But the difference between Sylhet and Bengal was not based on humanitarian discrimination by the Sylhetis against the Bengalis. It was a kind of social and historic kind of difference. But the attack that they mounted by the piece in the Sunday Times magazine on the 2nd of December 1973 made the Sylhetis, it actually put the equation upside down and defamed the Sylhetis and condemned the Sylhetis as being of a dependent kind of relationship with Bengal or the other parts, which is not the case. And it misrepresented the Sylhetis, and it undermined the Sylhetis in every respect. So that attack was mysterious because there was no reason for that. And secondly, it contained the biggest lie that can ever be found in the history of Bangladesh, because the campaign internationally during 1971, 9 months of which was spent in fighting for the separation or liberation of Bangladesh from Pakistan. Internationally in 1971, the international kind of population of the overseas East Pakistanis in Western Europe and in the kind of Middle East were mainly, or in the absolute majority, the Bangladeshi, overseas Bangladeshis or East Pakistanis at the time until December 1971 were Sylhetis. So the Sylhetis led the international demography in support of Bangladesh. And one of the leaders was my father in London, who organized, among other people, but he was one of the main leading organizers of the people of our area in Sylhet. People who came from our part of Sylhet to the UK. And yet the Sunday Times article said that the Sylheti-speaking people in Brick Lane were not even aware of the Bangladesh liberation war going on. And that Bengalis from other parts of the UK had to come to Brick Lane and make the Siloti speaking East Pakistanis aware of what was going on back home, which was the attack by the Punjabi military on the ordinary people in still East Pakistan. That was the biggest lie, criminally conceived denial. And so when this article was published, and as I said, my late uncle, who is now deceased, but he was younger than me, but we grew up together and we were in the village very close to one another because we fought the crooks even in the village in those days, even when we were young children. We took up various cases and we fought the criminals. And we were the only two in the whole village that worked like that because we didn't see anybody else doing that, kind of taking on the kind of grown up adult crooks and criminals and liars. So when I came to the UK, my uncle, his nickname is Mona, actual name is Nurul Islam, he became like he and I re-established our contacts. So on the Sunday morning, because he worked the whole week, on the Sunday mornings, he would come to me, which is in New Road, with all the Sunday papers. And on that Sunday, the 2nd of December 1973, he was there and we were having tea. And I was reading the Sunday Times and the article in the magazine. And I read that and I couldn't believe my eyes. And I told my uncle what this article meant. And he was in London in 1971. And he said, I'm going to go and kill them. I said, who are you going to kill? He said, those Bengalis, whom this magazine is saying, came and kind of raised our consciousness about what was going on. I'm going to find them and kill them. I said, we do not want to do any such thing. What we want to do is to put the record straight. So he and I discussed for several hours what he did in 1971 for Bangladesh. And then I started to translate this whole article. And we took the various highlights and the highlights that were actually very offensive, insulting references to the Silotis. And so the campaign began that evening. And it went on for the best part of 2 years, not with him because he was working. I did the campaign and a few other people were involved with me, but I had to do the campaign for about 2 years. Now that was the major campaign that I did about the community in East London. So Galloway had no idea what was going on, what had gone on. That was in 73, 83, 93, 2003. That was 30 years. 30 years before Galloway surfaced in the East End of London. 30 years plus. So we started 73. If Galloway was born in 1954, 64 he was 10 years old. And 73 he was under 20. He was a teenager. So when we started defending the community while Galloway was in Scotland as a teenager, what would you know what we had been doing? Now, Galloway boasted that he didn't want to sue me for defamation because he said I didn't have any money. How dare you, racist liar? If I sent bills to Galloway, he would not be able to pay even a fraction of the damages that he owes the community. He would not be able to pay that for the rest of his biological life. So when we started the campaign against the Crossrail hole, Galloway didn't exist. And when we did the campaign against the Sunday Times, of course, Galloway didn't exist. And when we continued the campaign for democracy and defending the community against the corruption that Galloway colluded with, that is to do with the imposition of the criminalization and the corruption in the form of the elected mayor. Politically, ethically, morally, Galloway didn't exist. And with the ever increasing evidence of the Western countries turning further to the right, as some claim, Galloway is manifesting himself in an odd situation. He's still getting financial kind of temptations. He's maintaining the temptation, which is linked with his claim that he is a supporter of the Palestinians. He's keeping that intact, that pretension. But he's given up all public solidarity statement and claims against racists, against imperialists. But how could he even remotely begin to say that he is against imperialists when he begs the supreme imperialist in Britain, Nigel Farage, to give Galloway a seat or constituency opportunity to fight that by-election in Peterborough, which Nigel Farage rejected him on. And when he got the election propaganda in Bradford West in 2012, there were several videos produced that claim that Galloway was like some of the most high-profiled African Americans fighting American imperialism colonialism. Until that time, Galloway never made such pretense. So it was a complete lie. It's a false claim. Now, in the kind of intervention that I started on the 17th of January 2006 in the Hanbury Street, I said that there was no one. There was no one who was supporting the target of Tony Blair's attack on the constituency. And I was meaning, because factually it was George Galloway who was the target. And as soon as I said words to that effect, I noticed that there was sudden excitement among some individuals who had stayed absolutely, who had maintained total radio silence throughout the previous weeks, during which the British media had a regular item of news about George Galloway being in the Big Brother house. No one said a word. No one from George Galloway's later kind of so-called team of advisors or associates had the courage, the political courage to come out and defend anything that they could claim to be defensible in George Galloway's decision to take the money of Endemol and go there on this scandalous house of sin. So Una King had been under serious scrutiny from our campaign throughout the period since we began the campaign against the Crossrail Hole plot. And Galloway would never have got in at the 2005 election if we had not made it a policy of our campaign to oust her. We ousted Una King and we ousted a number of leaders of the Tower Hrs Council. We ousted Abbasuddin alias Halal, and effectively we destroyed the credibility of the crook that followed Abbasuddin alias Halal, Michael Crook. That word, Michael Crook, is the word that our campaign devised based on the evidence of his behavior and edited the name Michael Keith. We call him Michael Crook. And in March 2006, at a gathering held in the Mile End area, Michael Crook was there when we said to his face, I spoke at the gathering and called him Michael Crook. Michael Crook was the leader that took over from Abbasuddin alias Halal, Tower Hrs Council leadership. And what did happen? Michael Crook came to one of the meetings of the what is called the monitoring, the local government scrutiny kind of committee that I was a member of. And in front of the others, I called him a liar and gave the chapter and verse. So these are the people that were with Una King. And each and every one lied. We didn't invent anything. Each and every one lied about the community and lied to the community and lied for the cross railroad and whatever other programs they were doing against the community, like the transfer of the housing stock. Galloway never publicly shared with the Khoodeelaar campaign what he was doing, if he was doing anything, to stop the transfer of the housing stock, which is already almost done by the time he got in as a member of parliament. But as we have said before, even if there were kind of years before the program was concluded, there is no evidence that Galloway would have done anything to stop it. Why? Because the index, the authentic indication of what a member of parliament does about campaigns, one of the most authentic indications of what a member of parliament does politically in terms of campaign while they are in place as the elected member for whatever constituency they are in the House of Commons on behalf of, is to be found in the early day motions. Now, the EDMs, the early day motions, are actually submitted as token, not necessarily with the expectation that they would be successfully debated, let alone passed, but as an indication of the political priorities that a particular member of parliament kind of wants to be known for. Now, if you look at the early day motions that George Galloway submitted during his 5 years in place as member in the name of the Bethnal Green constituency, you cannot find any of the issues. You cannot find one single issue that affects the ordinary life of ordinary people in the ordinary constituency of Bethnal Green and Bow. Because the only reference to the deprivation that Una King made in her question to Tony Blair in June 1998 was to give the appearance of depth of understanding and depth of evidence, and she referred to the German index. Now, the German index has been replaced since she cited it, of course. But apart from that, there was no move, there was no step, there was no initiative that she took that showed that she was in any way in touch with the reality of the lives of the people in the constituency. And she most certainly never, ever talked about colonialism, imperialism, let alone racism in this country. So when she suddenly launched the fact that she had a father with the pretensions that she kind of painted around him, who was a conscientious objector, it was astonishingly, gobsmackingly offensive. And it also proved that she was a liar, because she never mentioned the fact that she had even a father, because she might have had a father, but he might have been dead or something. But it turned out that he was not only not dead, but that he was a black academic. He was not. None of his alleged academic credentials was known to me in the decades that preceded Una King's kind of appearance in Bethnal Greenbow. And I should know because I read all the newspapers, and I'm the only one who reads all the newspapers. I don't know of anyone else who reads all the newspapers. And I am the campaigner who would have known of any genuine campaign, and I would have most certainly known about this particular conscientious objector. And I had never heard of her father. Now, about George Galloway, I had known about him way before he surfaced into our omelets. And I had known about him in connection with the war on want. As a political campaigner, I had to study what the whole thing was about, and it was full of allegations against George Galloway. Allegations to do with money. As I said, I come from a background where my great-grandfather gave away the equivalent in value, billions of pounds. And I have been saying no to numerous offers of money. If I send the bills to not only Galloway but others, bills of costs, bills of damages that are owed to me by Galloway and the others, none of them would be able to begin to clear the bills during the rest of their biological lives. Secondly, Galloway followed my political agenda insofar as he surfaced as a supporter of the campaign, Khoodeelaar campaign against Crossrail. He had nothing original to say about this. He had absolutely nothing original to say about this. He borrowed from us. And in one sitting, when he was appearing before the Crossrail Select Committee of MPs, he made two false and untruthful statements. One was that he referred to me and the others, my supporters, if you like, behind in the so-called public gallery part. He referred to us as leaders of Khoodeelaar campaign. There was no such thing as leaders of the Khoodeelaar campaign. I had to lead, organize, mobilize every time. And the fact that he said leaders was not because he didn't know that. It was because he wanted to deny the work that I was doing. Now that kind of petty jealousy was shameful because I'm not in competition. I'm not kind of scrambling. I'm not going around looking for a constituency seat, let alone any seat that he might want to kind of represent, if you like. So there was no need. But yet there is a kind of quite clear, jealous kind of refusal. Okay, here is a reference to George Orwell's papers. Let's shift away from George Galloway to George Orwell. A flirtatious letter written to George Orwell's wife by an admirer has given new clues to the author's time fighting in the Spanish Civil War. Homage to Catalonia. A copy of the letter in a government archive in Moscow shows a Soviet agent trying to worm his way into the affection of Eileen Blair, that is Eric Blair's wife, whose husband Eric Blair published under the name George Orwell. The letter not only exposes the murky world the couple experienced in Spain, but also gives hope that Orwell scholars may be able to track down a cache of documents stolen by Soviet spies in June 1937. Agents acting for the Soviet Union ransacked the couple's hotel room in Barcelona while Orwell fought alongside Spanish communists and Mrs. Blair worked as a secretary for the Independent Labour Party. D.J. Tyler, the writer's biographer, said the documents would represent the holy grail of Orwell's studies, giving insights into the man who went on to write Homage to Catalonia, Animal Farm in 1984. Not only is the letter a translated copy of one of the stolen documents, but the file in which it was discovered at the Russian State Archive of Socio-Political History was next to one that contained an itemized list of the other missing documents. The letter to Orwell's wife is a playful note from David Weeks. Who do they describe David Weeks to be? Or what do they describe him? Ostensibly an interpreter for the Independent Labour Party, but actually a spy for the Comintern, an international organization filled with Soviet agents. My dear Eileen, he wrote, I was a bit dismayed when you recently mentioned that an American gentleman called you Eileen, despite never having spoken to you before, even if your innocent manner made it clear that you did not put me in the same category. Even so, the lack of any response to my awkward, friendly advance have left me in the dark about what you think of me, or even if you think of me in any positive manner at all. And I wish you would, because I like and admire you. Whether Mrs. Blair was susceptible to Wick's charms is unknown. Tyler said that she had suitors and Wicks would have wanted to use her to get access to her party boss. During her first month in Barcelona, Eileen had a lively time, Taylor told the Times. There were several spy admirers whose regard blurred with political motives. She wrote to her mother in March, I have had 3 superb dinners in succession. I have coffee about 3 times a day and drinks opena. oftener, drinks oftener, that is, more frequently. Tyler said that despite the temptation of affairs, she clearly worshipped Orwell. The copy of Weeks' letter, translated into German, the official language of Comintern, was found by a research team led by Gleb Zilberstein, who specializes in investigating historical documents. Zilberstein also found a list in French of other items taken from the Blair's room, including photographs of the couple, drawings, and postcards. This included a poem signed by Georges Kopp, Orwell's commander, and another of his wife's admirers. Tyler said Kopp was a tantalizing figure whom biographers suspected of having had an affair with Mrs. Blair. The poem is a new one, he said. Eileen's friends noted how later on her eyes would light up when he was mentioned. No definitive proof of a liaison, though, and Kopp was solicitous about conveying Eileen to the front, allowing her to spend time with her husband. Orwell and his wife survived the Civil War, though he was shot in the neck. They became fugitives because of their association with an outlawed communist group. Zilberstein has submitted his findings for publication in the journal George Orwell Studies. So that's the piece about George Orwell, that is Eric Blair, on page 22 of the Times of today, Monday, the 17th of January 2022. Now, going back to the 17th of January 2006 and Hanbury Street, the gathering of KhoodeelaarTV campaign at the middle of Hanbury Street. Now, we had held a kind of rally in the Princelet Street not long before. And these rallies were small, but they gave the impression that we intended to give, which is to say that we are actively, physically in the streets opposing the Crossrail Hole plot. And that was more than adequately conveyed by our kind of rallies and gatherings. When George Galloway came out of the Big Brother house, he spoke to several people and he was emotional and he was completely uncertain. He feared for quite a while that he was going to get ousted. A recall petition was going to be organized against him and he was going to get ousted. But he did come across as being completely an outsider in the borough. For example, in March 2006, we had this meeting against Crossrail in the Mile End, and there was a statement by Galloway that he had paid for the booking of the church room or hall that the meeting was held in. And I had no idea of his involvement because I was sent an invitation by somebody I had never met and who invited me as a speaker against Crossrail Hole. So when Galloway made the claim that he paid for the booking, it came as a completely awkward kind of contribution, because that showed that he didn't actually belong with the movement against Crossrail Hole. He didn't belong with the community. Because if I had paid something, I didn't declare that I had paid for this. Maybe later I would have done that. And Galloway made that claim that he had paid for this. And so this is again a reminder to Galloway that he should declare how much money he has received by the post and how much money he has received as donations through various bank accounts over the years. And what would those donations have been about or for? Because when he said that to me, that he wasn't going to sue me because I didn't have any money, what did it show? It showed that Galloway has no values. He was not bothered about principle. The only way he would sue anyone, according to that statement, would be if the person or persons he was going to sue had money according to him. He doesn't have any values. Has he thought about that? Now, this is a stupid cartoon in the Times today. It's a dead animals, and they're saying the Operation Dead Meat. They're killing animals, and that is what they're doing to save Boris Johnson. Not going to even put that cartoon before the camera. So when George Galloway said in November 2014 that it was his becoming a member of parliament from Petnangarambo, that paved the way for a Bengali to be elected for the first time. That showed that Galloway was a racist of the most embarrassing kind, but the people he was addressing were politically and intellectually dead. Otherwise, he would not dare say anything like that in front of a group of people, most of whom can be described as nearer to being ethnically Bengalis than Galloway would ever be himself. Along with George Galloway's stupid claim, racist claim, was Ken Livingstone's stupid claim that there should be people, he didn't specify who, but supposedly he suggested that supporters of Lutfur Rahman should go to the homes, find out the home addresses of Eric Pickles' commissioners that Pickles had announced on the 4th of November 2014 when he spoke in the House of Commons about the Price Waterhouse and Cooper report into the Tower Hamlets Council's finances. And Ken Livingston Livingston said that if you go there and make their life miserable. How could Livingston, lying still Livingston, say any such thing? Anyone watching this and not familiar with the various electoral political kind of factors needs to know this. First of all, Eric Pickles, the community secretary as he was in 2014, this is the department of the UK government, central government department, that is supposedly kind of in charge of local councils like Tower Hamlets. I mean, it's a bureaucratic hierarchy. So Eric Pickles was in post, which post carried various briefs and remits. And one of the remits was to hold the local councils accountable to the central government through him or through his office. So Pickles announced that commissioners would be sent to Tower Hamlets Council because the council was found to have been irresponsible in its financial decision making and conduct, etc. But this was only 14th of November, 10 days since Pickles made that announcement. And it would be several months after that any commissioner would be actually visiting Tower Hamlets, let alone be permanently posted there. And to incite people to go to these so-called commissioners needed the specific name and address of these people, but they had not been named even by Eric Pickles. So you can imagine that people who were being addressed by Ken Livingston at the Water Lily place, same gathering that George Galloway had addressed, when he racistly boasted and took credit for the parliamentary entry by any Bengali. He said it's all his credit. Now, these kind of claims show just how racist and backward and ignorant this so-called left, the white left, who have been patronizing Lutfur Rahman are. And that shows the political depth of the sitting councillors and the so-called politicos. None of the communities that actually are claimed by the likes of Roy Hattersley, who said that he's Asians in Birmingham, or Galloway, who claims that all the Muslims know him. That is mentioned in the current wiki entry about George Galloway. There is a whole section which contains the reference that Galloway claims that every Muslim knows him. How odd and stupid is that? When the BBC, what program was called the politics show. It used to go out on the Sundays. And there was an edition of the politics show that was broadcast on the 26th of March 2006, which had Galloway as a guest there. But that whole program about Crossrail was brought about by me. And Galloway never wanted to acknowledge that. He was only invited by the BBC because he was the local MP. But the program was caused by me, the campaign. Yes? And the same program people had come the previous week, that is Tuesday, and they recorded the interview with me and K. Jordan in the Greater X Street in the building called BDC, Bethnal Green Development Center or something, or Business Development Center, on the Tuesday before the Friday, before the Sunday. And the whole week in March was spent by Ken Livingston Livingston, who was still in post as the elected mayor in the name of London. A lot of exchanges between Ken Livingston Livingston and the government's Department for Transport, we call DAFT, took place, and they made several serious changes that included the precursor to the dropping of the Crossrail whole plot against Brick Lane. What does that mean? The dropping of the plot against Brick Lane means that the people who have set up homes over the last 100 years, and I mean people in the significant context of those targeted by the Sunday Times article on the 2nd of December 1973, their descendants, their families and their relations. Those people have avoided being kind of dug out of their homes, if you like, because that would be a hole, the height of which can be measured by looking at the Tower Bridge. That is the depth which you can see by the height of it. And it would have been 10 years of dust and rubbish dug out through that hole. And there would be no homes, there would be no shops, there would be no businesses. You cannot even see a business or a home destruction lasting a year that can be repaired. So the whole community would have been physically driven out of the Brick Lane area. The community that the Sunday Times article on the 2nd of December 1973 had specifically targeted for intellectual demolition, rhetorical demolition. And this was the physical translation of that demolition that had taken place in 1973. So 73 to 83, 93, 2003, 30 years later. And for those 30 years, since 1973, the work that I have been doing, the work has included the continuing updating of the rejection of the Sunday Times article attack and the agenda contained in the attack. Nobody ever heard of George Galloway. Even when he was physically in the constituency, he didn't know which road led to where. You would have thought that he would have studied the map of the constituency that saved his life. If it wasn't for the Bethnal Green and Burr constituency, Galloway would never, ever get anywhere in Bradford West, because the people in Bethnal Green and Burr, his white associates, physically moved to Bradford West, and they said they are from Bethnal Green and Burr. And there are Muslims and there are Muslims. That is the business that he was in, trading Muslim. And then he goes to the worst enemy of Muslims, attackers of Muslim, Nigel Farage. And he prostrates before Nigel Nasty Farage, and Farage says to him, "Get lost," about Peterborough. And when he comes to my land, he says he is to be thanked as the leader of the Bengalis going into parliament. How sick! Okay, we are coming to an end to this particular edition, as I said, because of the length of the video that needs processing afterwards. So we shall be keeping it to this length. This is probably just under what time did we start? 1400 hours. So this is just a minute to 1600. So just around two hours. We shall keep to this kind of length.